Hey guys, tonight we're leaving behind the world of boring salads, responsible decisions and mild evenings at home, because tonight we're diving headfirst into one of the wildest, weirdest and most absurd chapters in modern British history. The legal mephedrone craze of the 2000s. That's right. Before anyone thought to ban it, a generation of Brits decided to try their luck with a substance that sounded like a cleaning product, and, for a few brief years, was easier to buy than a pint of milk. And since this is our brand new channel, before you settle in, maybe take a second to hit like and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what you find here. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim those lights, turn on a fan for that sweet white noise, and let your worries melt away. Just maybe not with anything you bought from a bloke in a car park. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to walk into a plant food shop and leave with something that turns your Friday night into a cross between a rave, a wildlife documentary, and a science experiment gone wrong? Why did so many normal people suddenly develop a deep, spiritual connection with small plastic baggies? Did anyone really believe Mephedrone was for their actual plants? What was it like to party until sunrise and then have to explain to your boss why you're chewing on your tie? Was anyone's grandma secretly running a side hustle out of her garden shed? And if everyone was supposedly having the time of their lives, why did it always seem to end with someone hugging a lamppost and declaring their undying love for dubstep? Well, congratulations. You've just woken up in Britain, sometime around 2009. Your pockets are full of loose change, a few crumpled £10 notes, and, if you're unlucky, a very suspicious packet of white powder labelled not for human consumption. Good luck. It's the late 2000s, and you're living in a world where legal highs are the new currency of cool. You've just wandered into a head shop sandwiched between a kebab place and a nail salon. On the shelves, every flavour of chemical alphabet soup. Mephedrone sits there, humming with forbidden promise, next to a jar of incense no one has ever actually burned. Welcome to Britain's latest get-rich-quick scheme, selling mild euphoria in Ziploc bags, no ID required. The first thing you notice is the smell. It's a potent blend of stale nag champa, cheap plastic, and the unmistakable aroma of adolescent ambition. The cashier, a guy with a neck tattoo of Bart Simpson, and the 1,000-yard stare of someone who's seen a few too many weird customer returns, gives you a nod that's equal parts respect and warning. Here, nobody judges. The shelves are crowded with things no one in the world has ever actually used for their stated purpose, unless there's a hidden subculture of people genuinely devoted to cleaning their pond filters every Friday night. You pick up a packet with a name like Blast Off Buzz or Cosmic Catnip. The packaging is aggressively vague, contains research chemicals, not for human consumption, which, translated, means we're all pretending here. The font is Comic Sans, the warnings are in 6 languages, and somewhere in the fine print you see an actual smiley face emoji. Safety first. At the counter, you hand over a crisp tenner and receive change, plus a business card advertising a loyalty scheme. Buy 10, get the 11th packet half price. You're not sure if this is encouraging responsible consumerism or just gambling that nobody's ever going to make it to packet 11. Outside, you glance both ways, because buying something legal still feels illegal, like you're living in a surrealist dream where every rule has a loophole and every loophole has a DJ. As you walk down the street, the shops blend together. Pawnbrokers, vape lounges, internet cafes filled exclusively with people playing solitaire. But you're clutching your little plastic packet like it's a golden ticket. The whole country seems to be in on the joke, from sixth formers in school blazers to middle-aged dads who just wanted to see what all the fuss was about. Mephedrone's unofficial slogan, "It's probably fine." At home, you put the packet on the kitchen table. It's sitting there, radiating possibility and a faint chemical tang that suggests you should probably not let it near your cat. Your phone is buzzing with texts, friends asking if you've got the stuff, friends asking what it feels like, friends asking if you can bring some to Sarah's birthday party. The sense of novelty is palpable. The excitement is less about the high and more about the fact that, for the first time in modern British memory, the authorities have been caught completely off guard. And that's really what sets this era apart. For a moment, the old generational contract has been torn up. The adults are confused, the tabloids are panicking, and the government is still trying to figure out how to pronounce Mephedrone. There's an electric energy in the air, a giddy sense that you're part of something historic, or at the very least, something that will become a cautionary tale for the next generation of bored teenagers. Let's talk about the price. Astonishingly cheap. For less than the cost of a pint and a bag of chips, you can buy a weekend's worth of questionable decisions. Students on shoestring budgets and clubbers on payday both leave with the same grin. There's something deliciously democratic about it. For once, the great British class system is momentarily levelled, not by politics, not by policy, but by a white powder in a baggie that everyone claims is for research purposes only. And so the dawn of legal highs arrives not with a bang, but with a knowing wink and a slightly manic laugh. Nobody knows exactly where this will end, but nobody wants to miss the beginning. The world feels looser, stranger, and just a little bit more exciting. You slip the packet into your pocket, already planning the story you'll tell, if not to your grandchildren, then at least to the friend who swore they'd never touch the stuff. The revolution won't be televised, but it might be live tweeted, right up until everyone loses their charger and starts hugging the nearest lamppost. You stand in your kitchen, reading the label. 4-methylmethcathinone, which sounds less like a party and more like a threat from your local water company. But the promise is intoxicating. An affordable legal buzz that won't land you in jail yet. You wonder if you're about to become part of history, or just a cautionary tale on BBC Three. You roll the little plastic bag between your fingers, half expecting it to start sizzling through the countertop. Mephedrone. It's not exactly a name that inspires trust. It's the kind of word you imagine a plumber muttering under his breath before sending you an invoice with a lot of mysterious surcharges. Ah, yeah, looks like you've got a bit of mephedrone in your U-Ben, mate. Could be pricey. And yet, here it is, openly sold, loosely regulated and highly sought after. It's not even pretending to be glamorous. No golden script, no pseudo-mystical branding, just a white powdery promise and a font that looks like it was picked out by someone who failed GCSE art. You Google it, because that's what modern caution looks like. The results are a dizzying cocktail of science jargon and panic. Synthetic cathinone, you read, similar to the active compound in cat. You nod knowingly, having no idea what cat is, but appreciating that someone out there, possibly in a lab coat, has made this sound almost respectable. The phrase designer drug pops up repeatedly, followed closely by stimulant, empathogen, and the slightly more worrying potential neurotoxic effects. You're beginning to think your Friday night plans might need a waiver and a medical chaperone. Let's be honest, mephedrone street names don't help its case. Meow meow, drone, MCAT, plant food. You try not to picture yourself at a party shouting, "Anyone want some meow meow?" over the sound of dubstep. In fact, you hope no one ever hears you say any of these things out loud, because nothing kills your mysterious vibe like offering plant food to a group of adults. The only thing less intimidating would be showing up with a pot of actual basil. And yet, this is the strange genius of the era. Because mephedrone wasn't illegal, at least not yet, there was no need to hide behind code words or whispered deals in dark alleys. You could order it online with free shipping and a bonus sample. It arrived by post right alongside your gas bill and the latest Pizza Express coupons. Sometimes, the packaging was so unassuming that it was easy to imagine your nan receiving a delivery and mistaking it for bath salts, or worse, actually pouring it into the tub and waiting for the tingly feeling to kick in. Curiosity gets the better of you. The forums are alive with stories, some glowing, some alarming, all told with the wild-eyed optimism of pioneers heading west. Took 2 bumps, felt like I could hear colours. 10 over 10 would recommend. Chatted up a lamppost for an hour. Lamppost wasn't into it. Didn't sleep for 2 days and rearranged my bookshelf by emotional resonance. The sheer variety of experiences is both exciting and vaguely terrifying. It's like reading restaurant reviews, but every meal might end with a trip to A&E. The instructions, if you can call them that, are equally vague. Research chemical, do not ingest, for botanical use only. If your houseplants start dancing, you'll know you've gone too far, but that's the loophole. Everyone knows what's really going on, but as long as you play along, the game continues. It's a perfect storm of British. Denial and entrepreneurial hustle. No one is quite sure where the line is, so everyone tiptoes along it with a wink. Scientifically, you learn mephedrone is a stimulant, a distant chemical cousin of amphetamines and MDMA. In the right dose, it promises euphoria, boundless energy, and a sense of connection so powerful that you'll want to hug every stranger in sight, including the ones judging your dance moves. The risks, palpitations, paranoia, and a come-down so existential you'll briefly consider becoming a monk. But right now, in the safety of your kitchen, it all feels very theoretical. The risk is half the appeal. This is the modern alchemy, turning a cheap powder into an epic night and a story you'll only half remember. You put the bag down and stare at it. It could be the start of a legendary adventure, or the world's most embarrassing emergency room visit. There's a peculiar thrill in not knowing. After all, that's the magic of Mephedrone's moment. Equal parts hope, hype, and the eternal British desire to see just how far you can push a loophole before it closes forever. So go on, take your first step into the unknown. Just maybe keep a glass of water and your mum's phone number close by. Somewhere in a converted garage, an amateur chemist is brewing up a fresh batch. Not a Bond villain, just a guy in rubber gloves and a Keep Calm t-shirt. The early mephedrone days are fueled by mail-order molecules and optimism, because apparently you can trust anyone on an internet forum with a username like CrystalWiz89. Let's set the scene. It's a chilly evening somewhere in suburban Britain. The smell of fish fingers wafts from next door, and a dog is barking at absolutely nothing. But inside this cluttered garage, history is being made, or at least chemistry GCSEs are being spectacularly put to the test. There's a folding table stacked with scales, spoons, and an intimidating collection of unlabelled bottles. Next to an unplugged lawnmower, there's a battered laptop open to a forum thread called Best Synthesis Hacks 2009. You know, the usual recipe for international fame, or at least a feature on Channel 4's Drugs Live. This is not the glamour of laboratory science. There are no white coats, no pipettes, and certainly no safety protocols. Instead, you've got 2 mates in tracksuit bottoms arguing about whether distilled water from the corner shop is pure enough. The rubber gloves are a recent innovation, mostly to keep the telltale smell off your fingers. It's hard to explain to your mum why the kitchen suddenly reeks of acetone, and just a hint of burning regret. Most of these early chemists aren't in it for science. They're in it for the thrill. Imagine being able to make something that half the country is whispering about, and that the other half is desperately Googling at 2 a.m. You don't need a doctorate, you need a supplier in China, a few empty jars, and a willingness to trust strangers with a 3-star Trustpilot rating and a Hotmail address. If your package clears customs, congratulations, you're now an entrepreneur. Or, at the very least, a guy who has to explain to his landlord why the utility bills have doubled this month. The forum culture is its own universe. People swap recipes and synthesis guides with the breezy confidence of someone sharing a sourdough starter. Try heating it in a water bath for 20 minutes. Don't breathe in during step 6. Whatever you do, never, ever add vinegar. It's the blind leading the blind, except the stakes are slightly higher than an undercooked loaf of bread. If you get it wrong, you're not burning your dinner, you're creating a scene that will later be described by the fire brigade as a learning experience for all involved. Then there's the question of purity. You'd think that making drugs would be the one area where you don't want to cut corners, and yet purity checks are performed with little more than a hopeful glance and maybe a taste test from someone called Big Dave. Sometimes the batch sparkles like powdered diamonds. Sometimes it turns green and smells like sadness. Either way, someone's going to test it tonight. Preferably not the family goldfish. In the early days, the operation is almost charming in its amateurishness. There's no criminal mastermind at work, just a couple of bored uni students, an internet connection, and a vague memory of what the periodic table looks like. They're not trying to take over the world. They just want to see if they can make a party last until sunrise, or at least until the police start asking questions about all those suspicious Amazon deliveries. The risk is almost part of the appeal. Every successful batch feels like winning the world's most illegal science fair. There's a giddy pride in watching your friends nod approvingly, in seeing your product whispered about in pub toilets and club smoking areas. It's not about the money, okay, it's a little about the money, but mostly it's about being part of the underground legend. You know you've made it when someone calls you the Walter White of West Croydon, even if your main claim to fame is nearly blowing up a microwave. Still, every homegrown chemist knows the clock is ticking. The government is catching on, the tabloids are howling, and somewhere a newly hired customs official is holding up a packet and frowning at the word research. But for now, in this fluorescent-lit garage, history is fizzing in the beaker, and hope is very much in the air, alongside a few unintentional fumes. You take off the gloves, wipe your brow, and vow. One more batch, then you'll quit for good. Just as soon as you find out what happens when you add just a splash more acetone. You know, for science. It's a Friday night. Someone pours a little mound on a CD case, and just like that, you're on a carpeted magic carpet ride. The curtains twitch, the bass drops, and you're suddenly convinced that petting the dog is a spiritual experience. You're not sure if you love everyone, or if you just love the concept of socks. Either way, this is what freedom tastes like. Tingly, slightly chemical, and with a hint of regret. The room is softly pulsing with the glow of LED fairy lights, 3 lava lamps, and a television screen displaying a music visualizer from 2006. You're sitting cross-legged on the floor with your friends, half listening to a remix of a song you haven't heard since your last bad haircut. The air smells like supermarket pizza, cheap scented candles, and a nervous energy that borders on euphoria. You're all trying to act casual, but everyone keeps looking at the CD case on the table as if it's a holy relic, or at least the closest thing you've seen to genuine excitement since the 2-for-1 offer at the kebab shop ended. Someone, usually the friend who claims to have done this loads of times, takes the first little bump. You watch as they sit back, eyes wide, mouth stretching into a cartoon grin. It's nice, they declare, as if reviewing a hotel on TripAdvisor. Then it's your turn. You try to look nonchalant as you lean over, take a careful dose, and wait for the universe to respond. Within minutes, the change is unmistakable. Every song sounds like an anthem. The carpet feels soft, luxurious, almost decadent, until you remember it's the same rug you once spilled curry on after a disappointing night out. You look at your hands and marvel at how soft they are. You consider texting your mum just to tell her she raised a legend, but you wisely resist, for now. The dog, previously just a background presence, is suddenly the wisest soul in the house. Someone starts giving it an impromptu TED talk on the interconnectedness of all living things, and you realize you're nodding in agreement. The conversation meanders, first to what would happen if humans had hooves, then to a heated debate about whether crisps are better than chips. You're not sure if you're contributing to the discussion, but you're definitely making enthusiastic hand gestures. Somewhere, a phone vibrates. It's another friend, letting you know they're on their way. You try to remember how doors work and the task feels monumental. Someone suggests ordering more food, then forgets halfway through dialing. Every light feels too bright and every shadow seems packed with meaning. You wonder briefly if this is what being a philosopher feels like, except philosophers probably didn't need to keep checking if their pupils were the same size. You become aware of the bass. It's not just music anymore, it's a second heartbeat. Someone is dancing in socks, arms windmilling in the least coordinated attempt at rhythm the living room has ever seen. Nobody judges. You realize with a sudden burst of affection that you would lay down your life for everyone in this room, or at least you'd let them have the last slice of garlic bread. As the night drifts on, time bends and loses meaning. You're convinced it's been both 5 minutes and 5 hours since the music started. There are moments of joy so pure you almost tear up. There are also long, meandering discussions about how no one can ever know if their teeth are actually the right temperature. Someone tries to start a group chat about renting a villa in Ibiza, just for the vibes, and spends 10 minutes struggling with autocorrect. But all magic comes with a price. By 3 a.m., the energy has shifted. Your jaw feels slightly unhinged, your skin is clammy, and you're starting to think the dog might be judging you after all. The initial sparkle of the evening is still there, but now tinged with the sense that maybe, just maybe, the living room is less of a nightclub and more of a warning label come to life. As the sun hints at rising, you sink back onto the carpet, grateful for the softness, for the laughter, and for the understanding that sometimes freedom tastes like questionable powder, warm friendship and the vague memory of socks. You close your eyes and vow to remember this feeling, the weird, wild, wobbly moment when your friend's living room really did become Ibiza, if only for a night. As the sun comes up, your jaw is moving independently of your body, and you've chewed through half a packet of gum. Your teeth feel like they're plotting against you. Wonk jaw is now a medical condition, and the only cure is pretending you're fine until your face stops vibrating. Spoiler, it doesn't. You try to play it cool as you shuffle around the kitchen, but there's no hiding the fact that your mouth is performing its own remix of Riverdance. Every attempt at speech is sabotaged by a mouthful of chewing gum and an involuntary bite on your own tongue. You look in the mirror and try to will your jaw to behave, but it's having none of it. It's as if you've swapped your regular mandible for a novelty set of wind-up chattering teeth, the kind your uncle used to bring out at family parties, except this time you're the joke. Breakfast is out of the question. Toast is just a memory. Even porridge feels aggressive. The only thing on the menu is more gum and maybe an ice cube, if you can coordinate the motor skills to fetch one. You think about texting your friends to ask if they're still alive, but you remember that everyone in your group chat is currently busy massaging their own face, or typing out the phrase still buzzing mate with their non-dominant hand. There's a certain camaraderie in the suffering. No one warns you about this part of the night, sure. People talk about euphoria, about music feeling like a spiritual awakening, but no one ever mentions that the morning after will involve your jaw developing its own personality. You're not sure if you're clenching from excitement or from existential dread. Either way, your dentist would have a field day. And then there's the noise. It's not enough that your jaw is jittering around like a washing machine with a loose drum. No, now you're hyper-aware of every click, every pop, every subtle crunch as your teeth grind in time to a song only your nervous system can hear. You try to relax, but your muscles are determined to perform their own opening ceremony for the 2012 Olympics. Your friends compare notes in the group chat. Anyone else chewing their face off? My jaw's on strike. Is it normal to feel like your teeth are fighting each other for custody? The answers are always yes, yes, and oh, absolutely. Even the group's token tough guy admits to keeping a soft toy handy just for emotional support. You all joke about it, but underneath, there's a hint of concern, a quiet, unspoken hope that you haven't permanently reset your face into a Picasso painting. At some point, you try to drink water. It's harder than you remember. Half of it dribbles down your chin, but you feel weirdly proud just for getting it into your mouth. The gum is now flavourless, but you keep chewing anyway because it feels like the only thing standing between you and total dental collapse. Someone suggests eating a banana for potassium, but you look at the fruit with suspicion. Bananas are too ambitious. Eventually you surrender to the inevitability of it all. You stick on a hoodie, sunglasses, and attempt to face the day like nothing's wrong. Out in public you see someone else chewing a little too enthusiastically, and you exchange a subtle nod. The international sign of the Mephedrone hangover survivor. It's a badge of honour and a warning sign all in one. The hours crawl by. You practice deep breathing, face stretches, anything to coax your jaw back into submission. There's always that friend who insists the trick is to relax, which is easy for them to say, since their jaw is apparently made of marshmallow. You briefly consider looking up jaw exercises online, but decide it's probably best not to have how to stop chewing my own face off in your search history. By the afternoon, the sensation finally dulls. Your jaw slows, your teeth forgive each other, and you're left with a deep sense of gratitude for all the moments you didn't spend locked in facial combat. You promise yourself never again, but of course, you know it's a lie. Because in the grand tradition of British nights out, you'll forget about the wonk jaw just as soon as someone suggests just a little one next Friday. After all, memories fade, but the price of euphoria always finds a way to sneak back in, gum in hand, ready for round two. Every baggie, every tub, every packet bears the same phrase, not for human consumption. Sure, and you're buying it to fertilise your window box. Police know, the shopkeeper knows, your nan probably knows. But as long as everyone pretends, the party keeps going. Let's take a moment to appreciate the sheer Britishness of this arrangement. The whole country agrees to keep a straight face while tiptoeing around the most obvious lie since the dog ate my homework. You stand at the counter, eyeing a row of packets that might as well be labelled wink wink, nudge nudge. The packaging is less Breaking Bad and more Poundland Science Kit. Cartoon graphics, fake safety warnings, and instructions that read like a choose-your-own-adventure for plausible deniability. You exchange cash for a tiny tub of powder labelled plant food, not for human consumption. and the shopkeeper slips it into a brown paper bag with the kind of discretion usually reserved for medieval apothecaries or dodgy DVD sellers at the market. Nobody ever actually asks what you're planning to do with it. If you say, "For my gardenias," you both share a moment of unspoken understanding and immediately move on to the weather. It's a retail ritual, a performance where everyone knows their lines. Even the CCTV camera seems to roll its electronic eyes. At home, the theatre continues. You stash the packet behind a row of actual spices, just in case you need to show plausible deniability to a nosy housemate, or, heaven forbid, your mum. You wonder how many British households, at the height of the Mephedrone craze, had an unexplained cache of plant food hidden next to the paprika. Window boxes everywhere are thriving on a diet of mild neglect and powerful irony. And yet, somehow, the legal loophole holds. For months, maybe even years, the authorities perform an elaborate waltz. The police monitor the situation. Politicians review new evidence, and every time the news runs a segment about the dangers of legal highs, a fresh batch of packets labelled not for human consumption lands on shop shelves by Monday morning. The internet naturally gets in on the act. Forums are full of advice. Technically, you shouldn't eat it. But if you were to, hypothetically, here's what people say happens. The only thing less subtle then the product's real purpose is the wink in every post. There's a certain genius in the phrase itself. Not for human consumption becomes both a warning and an invitation. It's like telling a child not to press a big red button. You slap a skull and crossbones on a plastic bag, and suddenly every bored teenager in a 10-mile radius is texting, "You about tonight?" You'd think this would put people off, but instead, it gives the whole experience an illicit thrill, a sense that you're part of a secret club with the world's laziest bouncer. Meanwhile, the real botanists of Britain watch in bemusement as sales of plant food skyrocket, with none of their actual plants looking any healthier. Somewhere, there's probably a confused daffodil wondering why it hasn't achieved euphoria. But across the country, living rooms are suddenly more lively than any window box ever hoped to be. Then there are the stories you hear. The guy who, in a moment of pure commitment to the bit, actually sprinkled some on his spider plant just to see if it would grow faster. It didn't, but now the plant gets nervous every time it hears drum and bass. Or the girl whose nan found her stash and, bless her, added a scoop to the compost bin. The resulting tomatoes were disappointing, but the family cat spent the next week acting suspiciously fond of them. In the end, the phrase "not for human consumption" becomes the punchline to the world's longest-running in-joke. It's a social contract. If nobody says what's really happening, then technically nothing is happening at all. Everyone keeps their plausible deniability, their party invitations, and just enough distance from the truth to laugh about it all the next morning. So the party continues. You keep buying your plant food, your nan keeps pretending not to notice, and the government keeps drafting new laws while the window boxes remain as empty as ever. It's the great British compromise, just don't eat it, unless, of course, you do. You can buy everywhere, high street, internet, the back of someone's van at a festival. Head shops are popping up faster than coffee chains, all run by people who look like they once got lost at Glastonbury and never came back. It's a cash-only business, but at least they give you a loyalty card. It's the era of the head shop boom, a time when every empty shopfront between Greggs and the estate agents is suddenly draped in psychedelic posters and blinking open signs. The old carpet shop is now selling incense, herbal blends, glass pipes, and, of course, more mephedrone than you'd find in a forensic science textbook. If you ever wanted to experience capitalism in its purest, strangest form, you just had to stroll down your local high street in 2009. Walking into a head shop is an experience unto itself. The first thing you notice is the smell, a blend of burning sage, air freshener, and that unmistakable aroma of trying a little too hard. Every shelf is packed with things you didn't know you needed. Rolling papers in 30 designs, legal highs with names like Rocket Fuel and Zen Garden, and a bewildering array of bongs shaped like everything from dragons to rubber ducks. There are more grinders than there are herbs to grind, and at least one shelf dedicated to lighters that double as bottle openers, flashlights, or, in one memorable instance, a compass. Behind the counter is always someone with stories to tell. Maybe they're wearing sunglasses indoors, maybe a poncho, always with the air of a person who once saw The Prodigy at Reading Festival and never quite recovered. They don't check your ID because technically they don't need to. They do, however, give you the rundown on the newest arrivals. This one's meant to be really spiritual, mate, they'll whisper, as if discussing ancient secrets. If you're lucky, they'll slip you a stamp-sized flyer for an after-party you'll never actually attend. The most surreal part? The loyalty cards. Buy 10, get one free. It's the kind of deal you expect from a subpar coffee shop, not a retail experience where plausible deniability is the main product. You can almost imagine comparing stamp cards with your friends. I'm 3 away from a free gram. Suddenly your Friday night plans have more in common with collecting air miles than anything you'd admit to your mum. It wasn't just the high street, though. The internet exploded with new herbal retailers, most of whom operated from living rooms filled with bubble wrap and hope. Shipping was fast, packaging was discreet, and every email confirmation read like it had been written by someone hiding from a landlord. On forums, people traded reviews like sommeliers at a wine tasting. Really clean buzz, speedy delivery would recommend. It was a golden age for the cottage industry, just with a slightly more chaotic customer base. Festivals became a head shop extension. At Glastonbury, Boomtown, or even the smallest town fete with a drum circle, there was always a battered van selling legal highs. A queue would form, stretching past the burger stand and the questionable portaloo, and everyone in line would be pretending they weren't about to ask for the strongest stuff, please. At least you knew the staff would never judge you. Most couldn't remember the last 3 days anyway. With the cash flowing in, some shops started branching out. Why just sell plant food when you could move into energy drinks, glow sticks, and those weird hats with built-in dreadlocks? You'd see someone walk out with a packet of Mephedrone, a Bob Marley flag, and a watermelon-flavoured vape, and no one would bat an eye. Every transaction was a mini-adventure in British eccentricity. But beneath the tie-dye banners and novelty lava lamps, everyone could feel the timer ticking. The party couldn't last forever. Police would occasionally pop in, ask a few polite questions, and leave empty-handed, having learned nothing but the difference between herbal incense and botanical research. Parents would call council hotlines, only to be told, "There's nothing we can do at the moment." Even politicians bought time, commissioning reports and task forces that did little but guarantee another 3 months of booming sales. For a brief shining moment, head shops were Britain's most lucrative, most absurd retail sector. Like a mirage, they appeared overnight and just as quickly began to fade. But for those who wandered in with a tenor and a sense of mischief, it felt like the future, or at least a Friday night you'd never quite remember, thanks to your newly stamped loyalty card. And when the dust settled and the laws changed, the head shops simply pivoted to adult novelty and vape supplies, leaving only a faint whiff of nostalgia and incense behind. The golden age was over, but the legends and a few leftover loyalty cards would live on. Tabloid headlines are screaming about Bath, salts turning teenagers into werewolves. The term covers everything from mephedrone to whatever's left at the bottom of a chemistry set. You'd think every town centre is about to be overrun by rabid clubbers with glow sticks and no impulse control. The year is 2010. You can't walk past a newsstand without seeing a full-page splash featuring wide-eyed young people and lurid words like epidemic and zombie drug. Daytime television debates the dangers with all the scientific rigour of a village pub quiz. Parents peer suspiciously into their children's sock drawers, searching for evidence of bath salts, which could be anything from a genuine designer drug to a suspiciously fruity bath bomb from Lush. If your teenager's been in the shower for more than 5 minutes, you'd better prepare for an exorcism. On the high street, the panic spreads faster than a viral meme. Rumours bounce between schoolyards and workplace lunchrooms. Someone's cousin's mate once heard that just one dose will have you climbing a lamppost and serenading the moon. Another story says a bloke in Croydon chewed through a park bench and then tried to pay his bus fare in Monopoly money. Everyone seems to know someone who's met a bath salts casualty, though actual witnesses are rarer than a sober hen night. It's not just the tabloids fanning the flames. Local councils issue stern warnings on laminated posters, always featuring the same stock photo of a teenager in a hoodie, looking both menacing and slightly in need of a nap. School assemblies descend into chaos as a visiting police officer tries to explain the difference between synthetic cathinones and actual bath products. You see heads turn in the audience as every year 11 students silently calculates how many things they've ingested that might count as synthetic. The result is always more than I should admit. The term bath salts itself is a masterpiece of confusion. No one is quite sure where it comes from, maybe a bored journalist, maybe a chemistry teacher with a sense of humour, maybe someone trying to make dangerous drugs sound just a little bit less glamorous. Either way, the phrase catches on. Supermarkets notice a spike in sales of Epsom salts, as everyone from clubbers to the WI stock up just in case. The phrase becomes shorthand for everything authorities don't quite understand. If it fizzes, powders, or dissolves in water, better lock up your garden gnome. The panic becomes self-sustaining. Nightclubs start putting up no bath salt signs, right next to the no glassware and no stag parties warnings. Bouncers become amateur chemists, trying to spot illicit powders in a sea of chewing gum and crushed Tic Tacs. It doesn't help that the actual substances being sold are constantly changing, with chemical formulas tweaked to dance around the law. You get the sense that somewhere there's a scientist in a lab coat laughing every time a new headline hits the news. At home, the family group chat lights up with warnings. Aunt Linda shares a chain email about the dangers of sniffing household cleaners and synthetic euphoria. Nan is convinced that bath salts are what turned her begonias limp last summer. Your mum swears she read about a girl who turned into a lizard after just one sniff. No one is quite sure what to believe, but everyone's just a little bit more anxious. Even the government gets involved, holding urgent debates and launching task forces, which mostly seem to involve writing strongly worded letters and holding press conferences in front of grim-faced police officers and large piles of seized lavender-scented packets. Politicians mispronounce mephedrone on national television and promise action just as soon as they can figure out which committee is responsible for fighting synthetic spa products. Yet, as you look around, the world mostly carries on. There's no outbreak of teenage werewolves, no rampaging clubbers howling at the moon. The town centre is as sleepy as ever, if a little more wary, and perhaps smelling faintly of eucalyptus. And so, the bath salts panic settles into British legend. Part moral panic, part mass confusion, all wrapped up in a cloud of suspicion and lavender steam. The headlines fade, the tabloids move on, but somewhere, someone is still glancing nervously at the bubble bath aisle just in case. Inside your brain, everything is lighting up like a Christmas tree. Dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine are having a rave of their own. It feels amazing until it really, really doesn't. Scientists will later explain why you feel both invincible and like you might need to call your mum. Let's take a gentle, sleep-friendly journey into the party that is your nervous system on Mephedrone. First, the basics. Mephedrone belongs to a group of chemicals known as synthetic cathinones, cousins of the natural stimulant found in the cat plant, which is mostly chewed for fun by granddads in Yemen and very curious botanists everywhere else. But unlike its leafy ancestor, mephedrone is cooked up in a lab, then lovingly sprinkled into little packets and sold under the plausible fiction that you're just here for the window boxes. The first thing mephedrone does is elbow its way into your brain's reward system, shoving the doors open like a lad arriving late to the club. Your brain, which usually hands out pleasure chemicals like an anxious bouncer, suddenly goes full VIP service. Dopamine floods the dance floor. This is the brain's well done, have a biscuit signal, a chemical associated with motivation, reward, and the unstoppable urge to tell your friends you love them. Serotonin is next to join, bringing along feelings of empathy, confidence, and the kind of profound thoughts you usually reserve for 3 a.m. chats with strangers at bus stops. Norepinephrine follows, cranking up your heart rate, sharpening your senses, and ensuring you'll be wide awake for the next several hours, whether you like it or not. The combined effect is at first pure delight. Colours seem brighter, music is deeper, and even the dodgy wallpaper in your mate's living room feels inexplicably meaningful. You feel clever, energetic, and weirdly in tune with the universe, at least until you realise you've been monologuing about the spiritual symbolism of baked beans for 45 minutes. Suddenly, everyone's a philosopher, a comedian, and a very, very enthusiastic dancer. But here's the twist. All that neurotransmitter confetti isn't free. Your brain, sensing an emergency, tries to restore balance. It slams on the brakes, hard. The euphoria starts to fade. The music gets a bit much. That friend who was telling you about their dreams for the future now just wants to talk about their lost umbrella. And you begin to wonder if your jaw has always made that noise. The come down is as famous as the high. An emotional roller coaster featuring existential dread, the sudden urge to apologize for things you haven't done, and the ironclad certainty that you'll never sleep again. Scientists, at least, the ones who didn't quit after trying to keep up with the chemical alphabet soup of legal highs, later explain the whole saga in more clinical terms. Mephedrone acts as a powerful releaser of dopamine and serotonin, causing an intense rush of pleasure and sociability. But because it dumps out so much, so fast, your brain's supply gets depleted. That's why the morning after, you're left feeling like an empty, crisp packet, crumpled, regretful, and surprisingly sensitive to sunlight. There's also a physical side to this chemical symphony. Norepinephrine doesn't just boost mood, it jacks up your heart rate and blood pressure. That's why your pulse might feel like it's doing the Macarena, your palms are a bit sweaty, and you're convinced you can hear your own hair growing. Add dehydration and jaw tension to the mix, and it's less Ibiza, more dental, convention. Some people, chasing that elusive high, redose again and again, desperately trying to keep the party going. But the law of diminishing returns is brutal. Every hit delivers less joy and more jitter. Your neurotransmitters, frankly, are exhausted. The line between life of the party and Guy trying to have a deep conversation with the radiator is surprisingly thin. In the end, the science behind mephedrone is simple and a little tragic. a temporary loan of happiness, paid back in installments of grogginess, emotional flatness, and the nagging feeling that you promised to never do this again last week. It's proof that while modern chemistry can whip up a wild night, even the best rave eventually winds down. Your brain, like every good club, just wants the lights on and everyone out by sunrise. So next time you wonder why that first rush was so exhilarating, remember, it's not magic. It's just molecules in funny hats. Throwing a one-night-only party, you'll be thinking about both fondly and ruefully for days to come. For every hour of euphoria, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Sweaty palms, pounding heart, paranoia, existential dread. You promise yourself you're never doing this again, right after you check if there's any left. It's the law of the universe. What goes up must eventually come down, and Mephedrone is a strict enforcer. The high is all fireworks and group hugs, but the landing? More like a gentle crash through a plate glass window, tingly, confusing, and absolutely not recommended by any medical professional. Your body starts sending little signals, none of them comforting. That blissful energy turns jittery. Your pulse, which was thumping along to the beat, is now trying to break the land speed record. The palms that once high-fived half the room are now sweating like you've just been called into your boss's office, and your thoughts are zipping around so fast you're not sure if you've invented a new language, or just temporarily forgotten how to blink. The funhouse mirror extends to your emotions. Just hours ago you were solving all of your friends' problems with motivational speeches and impromptu dance routines. Now your inner philosopher emerges, armed with big, alarming questions like, why am I here? Did I text my mum last night? Is the dog disappointed in me? If you manage to get any sleep at all, it's restless and haunted by dreams that feel like David Lynch remixed a Channel 4 documentary about regret. Then there's the infamous come down. The serotonin has left the building, and now it's just you, the carpet, and a sudden urge to listen to sad indie music at a volume you'd previously have called illegal. Everything is a little too loud, a little too bright, and your jaw aches from all that aggressive gum chewing you swore you weren't doing. You might even attempt breakfast, only to discover toast is now the textural equivalent of sandpaper and tea tastes like betrayal. Physically, Mephedrone is the world's worst multitasker. Your heart races, your skin prickles, and your mouth is drier than a British sense of humour at a funeral. Water becomes your best friend, except, annoyingly, your body can't seem to hold on to it. You swing between intense thirst and the sudden conviction that you might actually be made of cardboard. Stomach cramps, hot and cold flushes, nausea, the vague sense that gravity is now optional. Side effects are not just a risk, they're practically a feature. Of course the brain joins in. You check the time, it's 6 a.m. The birds are singing, and instead of feeling peaceful, you're convinced they're judging you. Paranoia arrives, tiptoeing in with existential dread close behind. Is that siren for me? Did I forget to pay my rent? Was that the pizza delivery man or the ghost of all my bad decisions? These are the mysteries you'll ponder as you lie awake, wrapped in a blanket of regret and old festival wristbands. Naturally, this is when you vow, genuinely, sincerely, with the solemnity of a medieval monk, that you're done. Never again. You're going to run, eat kale, and meditate until your chakras are sparkling. But then you remember there's a tiny bit left in the baggie, just enough to make the floor seem a bit less cruel. Might as well not waste it, you think, as if you're saving the planet by recycling your poor choices. The group chat offers no escape. Everyone is suffering in sync, swapping come-down survival tips with the frantic energy of people trapped in a lift together. Someone suggests eating oranges, another swears by paracetamol, and one friend just posts a series of increasingly desperate animal gifs. There's solidarity in misery, and you cling to it. You know you'll all be laughing about this by next Friday, but right now it feels like the longest Monday morning in history. And yet, despite the full roster of side effects, sweats, shakes, sadness, and the peculiar sense that your tongue is now made of felt, somewhere in your sleep-deprived mind, you know you'll probably do it again. Not because you've forgotten, but because the brief high still glows in your memory, sharp and silly and full of possibility. So, if you find yourself staring at the ceiling, heart pounding, jaw clenching, and vowing never again, know that you're not alone. The cycle is as old as human curiosity. Experience, regret, recovery, repeat. At least next time you'll have a slightly better playlist and a big bottle of water ready for the ride down. The UK's club scene is suddenly buzzing. There are more hugs, more sweat, and a suspicious lack of coherent conversation. Bouncers have no idea what to do with you, but at least no one's fighting. Everyone is too busy telling each other that they're such a legend, mate. Picture it. A foggy Friday night, neon lights bouncing off puddles, and the bass from 3 different clubs competing in the distance. You and your mates pile out of a taxi and tumble into the queue outside a club called Lumin 8 or The Compound or something that definitely didn't exist last year. There's a general sense that something is different tonight, less edge, more optimism, as if the whole crowd has collectively decided to fall in love with the moment, each other, and the concept of shiny shoes. Inside, the transformation is complete. The air smells of cheap cologne, sweat, and the faint, persistent tang of anticipation. Normally there's a little tension in the air, cliques posturing, someone getting a bit too shouty over spilled drinks. But now, the only drama is 2 people hugging it out after realizing they went to the same dentist as children. Mephedrone has turned the dance floor into a very damp, very affectionate group therapy session with a house soundtrack and questionable ventilation. Conversations are wild in every sense. Nobody can stick to a topic for more than 30 seconds. One moment, you're discussing existentialism. The next, you're ranking flavours of crisps, and then you're professing your undying loyalty to a stranger in a bucket hat. You're actually like, my best mate now, you know that? You declare, wiping a bead of sweat from your brow. Somewhere in the background, someone's trying to start a spontaneous conga line, while a very confused DJ wonders why the crowd has started chanting, "Banter! Banter!" in perfect unison. The dress code is equally chaotic. Girls are dancing in festival wellies, lads have all unbuttoned their shirts to the navel, and there's always one guy in sunglasses at midnight who is convinced he's pulling it off. The glow sticks are back out in force. If you're lucky, you might spot a unicorn onesie or a suit jacket paired with shorts and trainers. Nobody cares. Fashion has officially taken the night off. The bathrooms, normally grim, territorial spaces, are now the venue for meaningful chats about life, the universe, and why there are never enough paper towels. Strangers bond over lost lipstick and missing mates. If you see a girl with pink hair and one shoe, tell her I love her. It's the friendliest lost and found you'll ever experience. Even the bouncers, who have seen everything, are thrown off. They're used to dealing with aggression, but tonight their main challenge is prying apart 2 people who've been hugging for 15 minutes and are now technically part of the same molecule. They exchange glances, shrug, and let the party continue. At least the worst thing anyone's done so far is try to order a kebab from the cloakroom. Out on the smoking terrace, everyone is suddenly a philosopher. You ever think about how stars are like just really far away streetlights? Deep conversations unfold, interrupted only by group selfies and bursts of laughter that sound just a little too intense. Everyone is thirsty, always thirsty, so the queue for water is longer than for vodka red. Bulls. The designated drivers eye the scene, trying to decide if it's the best or worst night to stay sober. And oh, the music. It's relentless. Everyone is dancing, but not in a coordinated way. More like a joyful, semi-synchronized flail, arms everywhere, hair stuck to faces, trainers sticking to the floor. Nobody's judging your moves because they're busy inventing new ones that may or may not be banned by the Geneva Convention. As closing time nears, you're drenched, euphoric, and surrounded by people who, just hours ago, were strangers. There are endless promises to meet up again, start a band, or at the very least follow each other on Instagram. You stumble into the night, cheeks aching from smiling, your voice hoarse from telling people they're an absolute legend. This is club culture at its wildest, silly, sweaty, heartwarming and fleeting. Tomorrow your socks will still be damp, your ears will still ring, and you might even cringe at the memory of raving to a remix of The Lion Sleeps Tonight. But in the moment, under those flickering strobe lights, it felt like history, or at least the best night out since last week. Mephedrone makes its way from nightclubs to small towns, from students to taxi drivers. Suddenly, everyone knows someone who's tried it, and every parent is convinced their child is seconds away from turning into a character from Trainspotting. The first ripple is subtle. A friend of a friend at work mentions it in passing. Someone's cousin brings it back from university, and before long, it's the hottest topic on every high street park bench and family WhatsApp group. The stories are everywhere. Maybe you overhear a conversation on the bus, two school kids trading rumours about someone who did a line in the science lab and could suddenly speak fluent French. Or it's the lady at the hairdresser's insisting her neighbour's garden gnomes have never looked more suspicious. Local newspapers leap into action. Front pages scream about the plant food panic and zombie drugs sweeping the nation, often accompanied by a blurry photo of a confused teenager blinking in the wrong direction. Community Facebook pages are suddenly alive with warnings, conspiracy theories, and at least one person who claims to have just seen someone sniffing something white in the Sainsbury's car park. Mephedrone is everywhere, but curiously, always just out of sight, lurking at the edge of every anecdote. For parents, it's a brand new flavour of worry. Suddenly, Mum is eyeing every bottle of Epsom salts with suspicion. Dad tries to have the talk at the dinner table, awkwardly steering the conversation from just say no to, if you must say yes, at least don't do it in the living room. School assemblies become impromptu interventions, with head teachers pausing just before lunch to issue dire warnings about the dangers of designer drugs. Someone's uncle makes a Facebook post that is equal parts rage, confusion, and a heartfelt plea for the return of the 1970s, when the worst thing you could find in your school bag was a half-eaten wagon wheel. Meanwhile, the youth of Britain take a more pragmatic approach. Some are genuinely curious. What's it like? Will it show up on a GCSE? While others roll their eyes and claim they've been there, done that, didn't rate it. The urban legends grow taller. Mephedrone makes you see in the dark, run a 4-minute mile, or confess your darkest secrets to the school hamster. It becomes, briefly, both the villain and the punchline of every story told in a sixth form common room. The real spread, though, is in the ordinary places, small towns where the local paper's most exciting scoop is usually about a stolen lawnmower. Now it's Mephedrone, always flooding the area, always ravaging the youth, even if the only evidence is a slightly emptier shelf at the local head shop. Taxi drivers discuss it at length between fares, offering their own theories, which range from it's all a government plot to nothing's been the same since Woolworths shut down. Of course, politicians wade in. There are fiery debates in Parliament, with backbenchers asking whether Mephedrone is the new menace on our streets, and what can be done to protect our vulnerable communities. A few well-meaning MPs try to pronounce Mephedrone on national radio, only to be corrected, live, by a 17-year-old with a part-time job at a vape shop. Across the country, everyone has an opinion and nobody agrees. Is it a harmless fad or the sign of civilization's collapse? Should we crack down or let people make their own mistakes? There are calls for new laws, for better education, for more after-school clubs, for the return of the cane. It's a moment of national soul-searching, conducted at the speed of social media and fueled by late-night phone-ins to local radio. Yet, beneath all the panic and pronouncements, there's a typically British sense of humour. Well, at least it isn't spice, someone will sigh, shaking their head with practised resignation. Could be worse, says another. Could be avocado toast. And everyone laughs, but the conversation never really ends. By now, Mephedrone has woven itself into the fabric of British life. A topic to argue about, worry over, or sneak a knowing glance about when someone's jaw is working overtime at the bus stop. It's a story that belongs to everyone in its way. And while the panic will fade and something new will come along, there will always be a part of the public that remembers when plant food meant more than just Miracle-Gro, and every taxi driver, dinner table and Facebook post was full of opinions about the latest national craze. A rumour spreads that Mephedrone turns your fingers blue. It's unclear if it's the drug, the baggy dye, or just circulation problems from texting your dealer at 3 a.m. But suddenly everyone is checking their hands like they're auditioning for a role as a Smurf. It starts innocently enough. Someone at a house party claims to have read online that everyone who does Mephedrone gets blue fingers. A few raised eyebrows, a couple of nervous laughs, and then someone points out that, actually, their friend's mate's cousin had it happen last week. Within hours, the rumour travels through WhatsApp groups, pub bathrooms, and Facebook posts written in all caps, gaining new details with every retelling. Was it permanent? Did it mean you were poisoned? Would it spread to your toes? The theories multiply faster than a club queue on a Friday night. Now, the great British public loves nothing more than a bit of homegrown medical drama. And so, every user and half the people who've never touched the stuff start inspecting their fingers like they're trying to spot an alien infection. Groups of friends compare their hands under the harsh light of kebab shops, holding them up for examination and announcing, nope, still regular coloured. Wait, hang on, is that blue or just cold? Suddenly, winter nights are filled with shivering crowds waving their hands about, debating whether they should call NHS Direct or just put on a pair of gloves. The blue finger panic is fueled by an unholy alliance of tabloid headlines, forum speculation, and genuine confusion. Mephedrone madness, teen wakes up with blue hands, blares one paper, conveniently skipping the fact that said teen had also spent half the night covered in marker pen and cheap booze. Health forums light up with photos, blurry, pixelated close-ups of knuckles and palms, each captioned, "Help, should I be worried?" The responses are equal parts scientific, sarcastic, and surreal. Probably just die from the baggy, writes one. My mates went green, is that normal, adds another. A third suggests, maybe try drinking more water, or less Mephedrone, or both. Of course, there's a kernel of truth hiding in all the hysteria. Some baggies really did leak dye, staining hands blue, pink, or whatever colour was on sale at the packaging warehouse that week. Sometimes it was just cold hands or the side effect of a night spent gripping your phone like it was a life raft. But facts are powerless against a really juicy rumour, especially when everyone's desperate for a new talking point at pre-drinks. The urban legend quickly evolves. Now it's not just fingers. Someone claims to have seen a bloke with a blue tongue, another with blue ears. One girl swears her cat turned turquoise just from sitting next to her. Soon the blue finger becomes a badge of honour and a source of gentle mockery. Spotting one in the wild is like seeing a rare bird. Friends nudge each other, whispering, "There's one." Proper Smurf vibes tonight. It doesn't take long for the blue finger myth to seep into mainstream culture. DJs joke about it between tracks, and university societies host Blue Hands Night. No mephedrone required, just food colouring and a willingness to get messy. Someone launches a joke Instagram page sharing photos of blue hands from across the country. It's part performance art, part public health warning, and mostly an excuse for everyone to talk about the one thing nobody is supposed to be talking about. Eventually, as with all good legends, the panic fades. People get bored, or they realise that actual smurfification is not in the cards. The focus shifts to a new urban myth, maybe about glow-in-the-dark teeth, or the dangers of listening to dubstep at high volume. But for a while, the blue fingers phenomenon rules the scene, giving everyone a tiny, ridiculous reason to connect, laugh, and, above all, check their hands just one more time, just in case. And so, another chapter in the great British tradition of drug folklore is written. Whether your fingers stayed blue, pink, or stubbornly unchanged, the real side effect was a sense of community, a shared story, and a reminder that sometimes the weirdest rumours make the best. Memories. You've survived the weekend, but now you're sweating out a hangover that feels like it's been designed by an evil pharmaceutical company. Your skin is dry, your soul is tender, and your only goal is to make it to lunch without weeping into your Pret sandwich. Monday has always been a hard sell, but now it feels like a personal vendetta. The alarm goes off and your body, still reeling from its mephedrone odyssey, stages a full-scale protest. Every muscle aches with the exhaustion of 1,000 dances, and your brain feels like it's been scrubbed out with a Brillo pad. You try to sit up, only to realise you've apparently lost the recipe for movement. Your limbs are heavy, your eyelids heavier. The memory of euphoria is just a cruel echo, drowned out by a chorus of regret and vague, haunting flashbacks of hugging a lamppost outside the kebab shop. Showering feels like a heroic act. You stare into the mirror, hoping your reflection will offer some encouragement, but instead you're greeted by a ghostly version of yourself, complete with puffy eyes and hair that looks like it's been through 3 spin cycles. You brush your teeth and wince, your jaw, still sore from a weekend spent chewing gum and existential dread, protests every motion. Somewhere your stomach is trying to decide if it's hungry, nauseous, or just existentially confused. Come-down breakfasts are bleak affairs. You poke at a piece of toast with all the enthusiasm of a Dickensian orphan, knowing that food is both your friend and your foe. Tea or coffee? Both seem like risky investments. The very thought of orange juice feels like a war crime. You settle for water, which tastes strangely metallic and unconvincing, but at least your body seems to remember what to do with it. On the way to work, the world feels louder, brighter, and distinctly more judgmental. You board the bus and immediately regret every choice you've ever made. The person next to you is eating crisps, and the crunch echoes through your skull like a jackhammer. The morning sun is merciless, illuminating every pore, every bead of sweat, every shred of shame. You check your phone, no missed calls, but a dozen group chat messages from your friends, all reporting the same sense of psychic collapse. Still alive? Barely. Why did we do that to ourselves? Never again. Until Friday. At work, you shuffle through your day with the stamina of a damp sponge. The keyboard clatters, your chair squeaks, and every email feels like a personal attack. Your brain, usually sharp and cynical, is now a mush of unhelpful thoughts. You try to remember how to sound normal, but instead you're left nodding blankly in meetings, hoping no one asks you to spell Mephedrone or, worse, productivity. The emotional hangover is its own beast. A sort of melancholy settles over you, equal parts sadness and nostalgia. You find yourself staring out the window, replaying highlights of the weekend and wondering if you actually told your mate you loved them or just thought it very loudly. Ordinary setbacks like a printer jam or someone microwaving fish in the office kitchen feel personally targeted. You draft an email and then read it back 3 times, convinced you've accidentally included a confession. You spend your lunch break searching the internet for miracle cures, vitamin C, bananas, hydration hacks, and even meditation. None of it helps, but the distraction is welcome. You nibble your Pret sandwich with the somber dedication of someone attending a memorial service for their serotonin levels. By late afternoon, the fog begins to lift, just enough to let a little hope in. You make eye contact with another pale, hollow-eyed commuter on the way home and share a knowing nod. The nation's Monday is one long, silent group therapy session, a time for reflecting, regretting, and quietly promising yourself you'll never do it again. And maybe, just maybe, next weekend you'll skip the party, drink some herbal tea and get 8 hours of sleep. Or maybe you'll just remember to stock up on coconut water and chewing gum. Because while the come down is brutal, there's always a part of you that thinks, against all reason, maybe next time will be different. Maybe next time you'll finally outsmart Monday morning. Until then, you do your best, clutching your sandwich and dignity and making it through another day in the wild world of post-party Britain. Cue the public service announcements, solemn news anchors, worried teachers, and your mum reading out headlines with words she can't pronounce. The government launches a helpline. The phone rings. Nobody answers. It starts innocently enough. An ominous segment on BBC Breakfast, where a presenter with perfect hair announces, "Tonight, a special report on a dangerous new substance sweeping the nation. Mephedrone, Mephedrone, something like that." The camera cuts to an expert who looks like he'd rather be anywhere else, and a table of confiscated baggies, each with "not for human consumption" written in bold capital letters. For 3 minutes, viewers across Britain eat their cornflakes in uneasy silence, convinced that their children are probably already in danger of sprouting blue fingers or launching a one-person rave in the garden shed. Meanwhile, the schools kick into full panic mode. Assemblies are called. Teachers, who usually spend their days refereeing disputes over stolen pens, suddenly become part-time narcotics officers. In the assembly hall, a PowerPoint flickers to life. The dangers of legal highs, clip art skulls, a few bullet points, and a stock photo of a teenager who looks suspiciously like the IT technician with a fake moustache. The deputy head does their best to sound stern and relatable, but you can feel the disbelief in the room. Someone at the back coughs, and the group chat lights up. This again? Bet Mr. Parsons has tried it himself. Parents, of course, are in their own state of gentle hysteria. The kitchen table becomes ground zero for the talk. Your mum sits you down, newspaper clippings in hand, trying to look both supportive and terrifying. Apparently it's made of bath salts, love. Don't you ever bring bath salts into this house. I mean it. You nod along, reassuring her that your only addiction is crisps, while quietly wondering if you could explain the difference between Epsom salts and mephedrone without setting off another hour-long lecture. The BBC, never one to let a public panic pass quietly, starts rolling out documentaries with names like Britain's Legal High Nightmare and the Mephedrone Menace, Inside the Plant Food Craze. Somber music plays over grainy footage of empty high streets, anonymous teenagers in hoodies, and stern-faced police officers. An expert in glasses explains that mephedrone is chemically similar to other stimulant drugs, which is BBC speak for "we have no idea, but it sounds serious." Interviews with concerned parents follow, usually filmed in kitchens with too many fridge magnets. "He used to be such a happy boy," says one. "Now he spends all his time listening to dance music and talking about molecules. If that weren't enough, the government wades in with all the subtlety of a marching band. Posters pop up on bus stops and in GP surgeries. Know the risks. Legal highs can kill. The hotline is launched, numbers plastered everywhere. But the only person who ever calls is a confused pensioner trying to report suspicious behaviour at the local garden centre. When a real teenager finally does phone in, it goes straight to voicemail. For every attempt at intervention, there's an equal and opposite force of teenage indifference. Leaflets are dropped into school bags, only to be used as makeshift rolling papers by lunchtime. The helpline number is copied down, but only because it sounds like a good prank call option. For every heartfelt BBC special, there's a viral video on YouTube of someone mixing up a bath, salts cocktail and pretending to chase the cat. The gap between adult anxiety and youthful curiosity has never been wider. But maybe, in a strange way, all this fuss keeps things just on the right side of caution. For every panicked headline and overzealous teacher, there's at least one honest conversation, one moment of genuine connection, and one more reason to think twice. Or, if nothing else, to hide your packet of plant food somewhere more creative than the sock drawer. In the end, it's a perfect British stalemate. Parents worry, teachers warn, the BBC investigates, and the kids, well, they carry on as usual. The real lesson? No matter how many posters you print, hotlines you launch, or headlines you read out loud, there's no shortcut to getting through to a teenager. You just hope that somewhere between the lectures and the documentaries, a bit of common sense sticks. Or at the very least, that they'll answer their phone when you call, just in case. When head shops start getting raided, the real entrepreneurs take to the internet. Suddenly, you're ordering plant food from a website hosted in Latvia and delivered by a postman who absolutely knows what's up but says nothing. The British stiff upper lip meet global capitalism. It happens almost overnight. 1 minute you're sauntering down the high street, loyalty card in hand, picking up a fresh baggie from a shop run by someone who looks like they've just wandered in from the world's longest music festival. The next, there's police tape on the door and a stern sign in the window, closed for refurbishment and legal reasons. But the party doesn't stop. It just goes digital. Welcome to the golden age of mail-order Mephedrone, where geography is meaningless and all you need is a dodgy forum link and a PayPal account. The sites themselves are a fever dream of broken English and dubious promises, genuine best product, fastest stealth delivery. Not for human, well, you know the rest. There are no customer service hotlines, just email addresses that begin with admin, and the faint hope that you won't be buying 10 grams of powdered disappointment. Still, business is booming. The internet has always been good at finding ways around the rules, and now it's operating at full throttle. In darkened bedrooms and on glowing phone screens, a new subculture blooms, one built on trust, risk, and a lot of low-res product photos. There's something exhilarating about it. You feel like a spy, a rebel, a pioneer in the digital Wild West. The thrill of clicking buy now on a packet of plant food that will cross 3 international borders before it reaches your doormat is both ridiculous and intoxicating. The British postal system, usually reserved for birthday cards and Christmas jumpers from Nan, becomes the silent accomplice in a nationwide game of plausible deniability. The postman arrives with your regular Amazon packages, slips you a nondescript padded envelope and gives you a look that says, "Don't worry, I've seen stranger things." There's a new respect for the men and women in Royal Mail uniforms, all of whom are carrying the hopes, dreams and questionable decisions of a generation. The forums are your guidebook, filled with advice, reviews and just enough horror stories to keep things interesting. Users post detailed, sometimes poetic, accounts of their purchasing experiences. Seller responded in under an hour. Parcel arrived in 3 days. Slight chemical whiff, but otherwise 10 over 10. Others are less fortunate. Tracked package from Estonia. Customs ate it. RIP my deposit. The community bands together, swapping tips on the best vendors and the safest shipping methods, stealth envelopes, decoy packages, even those weird plastic toy dinosaurs you haven't seen since childhood. Global capitalism doesn't care about national borders or moral panics. It only cares about supply and demand. Suppliers pop up from every corner of the world, China, Eastern Europe, even the back room of a pet shop in Sunderland. They promise the moon, deliver the stars, or at least something white and powdery, and disappear just as quickly, replaced by a new wave of entrepreneurs with even less customer service training and even catchier URLs. Of course, the authorities aren't completely oblivious. Customs officers up and down the country suddenly have a new hobby: inspecting jiffy bags, sniffing suspicious parcels, and trying to keep a straight face when someone claims they're importing exotic plant nutrients for their cactus collection. Every so often, a big bust makes the news: photos of confiscated baggies, statements about cracking down, the usual pageantry. But for every website taken down, 3 more spring up, each promising better deals and faster delivery. The irony of it all is delicious. The substance that once brought together sweaty crowds in British nightclubs now finds itself repackaged as an export product, travelling the globe with a click of a mouse. No more awkward shop fronts, no more side-eye from the guy at the counter, just you, your Wi-Fi connection, and the distant sound of a customs official sighing into their coffee. Mail-order Mephedrone is the ultimate British compromise. Quiet, unspoken, slightly ridiculous, and above all, adaptable. The market finds a way. And as you sign for your special delivery, you can't help but marvel at how ingenuity, capitalism, and a dash of old-fashioned denial keep the whole bizarre system ticking along, one package at a time. Rumours start swirling that the ban is coming. Cue nationwide panic buying. You've never seen so many people sprint through a shop clutching Ziploc bags and energy drinks. Black Friday, but for party people. It begins as a whisper. Someone's mate in London reckons the government's meeting tomorrow. Twitter and Facebook go wild. Suddenly, everyone you know is a legal expert, confidently announcing they'll ban it by Friday. Stock up, mate. You check the group chat. By mid-morning, it's overflowing with messages. Get down to cosmic gifts now. Heard they're shutting at lunch. Buy as much as you can fit in your backpack. Even the quiet one from uni who only shows up for birthday drinks is now a high-stakes logistics coordinator, mapping routes to every head shop in a 5-mile radius. By lunchtime, the shops look like they've been hit by a swarm of caffeine-fueled locusts. Where there was once a calm, slightly incense-scented air of plausible deniability, there's now a full-on supermarket sweep. You join the back of a line that wraps out the door and down the street, everyone jostling for position and peering over shoulders to make sure nobody's buying the last of the good stuff. The display of herbal incense and rolling papers is untouched. Everyone knows what they're really here for. The shop owner, normally as relaxed as a man running a business on borrowed time, is suddenly moving like an Olympic sprinter. Every transaction is a rapid-fire exchange. How many bags? 6. Cash only. Loyalty card? Doesn't matter. Plastic tubs fly over the counter, cash piles up in the till, and nobody asks for a receipt. You see a woman in her 50s elbow her way to the front, demanding, 3 for my nephew. Her nephew looking suspiciously like a man in his 30s wearing sunglasses indoors. There's a strange sense of camaraderie, like you're all survivors in some peculiar party-themed apocalypse. People swap tips on where to go next, who's still got stock and which shops have started rationing. One lad claims his mate filled an entire suitcase, planning to become the Pablo Escobar of Portsmouth, though you suspect he'll just end up with a wardrobe full of regret and an angry landlord. The supermarket sweep extends to the digital realm too. Websites start flashing warnings. Last chance. Ban imminent. Order now. The checkout pages are chaos. Servers crash, emails fly, and every package sent out by recorded delivery is tracked with the kind of obsessive precision usually reserved for rare trainers or concert tickets. The Royal Mail and every courier company in Britain gets a taste of the frenzy. Drivers racing around with padded envelopes, giving each other knowing looks at the depot. Somewhere, a logistics manager wonders why every package out of Norwich this week weighs exactly 7 grams. Of course, all the panic buying is tinged with the usual British humour. People post photos of their haul on social media. Dozens of baggies arranged like Pokemon cards, captioned, "Gotta catch 'em all," before they're illegal. Someone tries to sell a single gram on Gumtree for the price of a second-hand car. You see a bloke in a tracksuit sprinting down the street, grinning like he's just won the lottery, pursued by a mate shouting, "Don't drop it, that's my Friday sorted." Even those who've never tried Mephedrone get swept up in the excitement. It's the British way. If there's a queue, join it. If everyone's panicking, you must be missing out on something. Granddads, students, off-duty nurses, everyone's got an angle, a story, a plan. The country is united in its last-minute grab for a legal high, a nationwide flash sale of euphoria, regret, and mild chaos. And then, as quickly as it began, the sweep is over. By sunset, the shelves are empty, the shutters are down, and a generation's worth of plastic baggies are quietly stashed under beds, in sock drawers or behind cereal boxes. The nation collectively exhales, checks their haul, and wonders, what exactly are we going to do with all this now? In the end, it isn't just about the high. It's about the chase, the thrill of grabbing one last taste of freedom, even if it's just powdered nostalgia and a story you'll tell at parties for years to come. The supermarket sweep was messy, hilarious, and pure British panic. Proof that when it comes to the great national pastimes, queuing and a good bargain will always top the list. After months of denial, MPs finally realise half the country is on something stronger than tea. They hold urgent debates, mispronounce Mephedrone a dozen ways, and accidentally inspire a whole new set of memes. It all begins in that most British of places, the House of Commons. There's a rumble of concern, a wave of bewildered emails from constituents, and finally a tabloid headline so lurid it can't be ignored. Something like, "Britain's youth high on plant food. MPs demand answers." Overnight, Westminster is thrust into action, or at least the closest thing to action possible when everyone is still arguing about last week's biscuits. The urgent parliamentary session is called. The tone is grave, the benches are full, and the Speaker's chair creaks with anticipation. On one side, a stony-faced Home Secretary, on the other, backbenchers furiously clutching printouts from Wikipedia. Nobody can quite agree how to say the name. Mephedrone, Mephedrone, Mephedrone. You could almost make a drinking game out of it if half the room didn't already sound a bit tipsy on confusion and caffeine. A government minister stands to give a statement. "This is a serious matter," she intones. "We must protect our young people from the scourge of this mephedrone, this dangerous substance." She glances at her notes, hoping for clarity, but only finds more words like synthetic cathinone and psychoactive alkaloid. Somewhere in the public gallery, a teenage intern snorts with laughter and starts a meme account. What follows is classic political theatre. MPs from rural constituencies describe disturbing scenes outside head shops. Teenagers with glazed eyes and blue fingers, clutching suspicious baggies as if every high street has become a cross between Mad Max and the Beano. Urban MPs counter that it's a symptom of deeper social issues, which is the polite way of saying, "It's your problem, not mine." The usual suspects call for new legislation, harsher punishments, and zero tolerance. Someone suggests a task force, which everyone knows is code for "let's look busy until this blows over." Meanwhile, as the debate drags on, the internet is ablaze. Every mispronunciation, every mangled metaphor, every instance of an MP saying, "When I was young, all we had was a cup of tea and a rounder's bat," gets clipped, shared, and turned into reaction GIFs. Twitter explodes with mock tributes. Mephedrone challenge. Even TikTok joins in, with teens filming themselves pretending to give parliamentary speeches in dressing gowns and slippers, mispronouncing mephedrone as creatively as possible. The government, never one to let a crisis go unlegislated, pledges immediate action. Committees are formed, white papers drafted, and suddenly the BBC is full of very serious people solemnly discussing whether this so-called legal high might destroy the fabric of society. A few MPs try to look relatable, sharing stories of their own youthful experiments with plant food, usually meaning they once helped water the dahlias at their aunt's house. All the while, actual scientists and doctors are invited onto panels where they attempt to explain, in calm, measured tones, what mephedrone is and why it matters. They use words like dopaminergic pathways and risk of dependency, which are promptly ignored by everyone except the 3 viewers who are awake for Newsnight. By the time the evening news rolls around, all that remains is a patchwork of good intentions, bad pronunciation, and the sense that, once again, Parliament has spent a whole day discussing something none of them actually understands. In the end, it's not so much a reckoning as a ritual. Laws are proposed, amendments are argued over, and finally, someone suggests banning the substance outright. The media declares victory, the MPs pat themselves on the back, and the public, as ever, shrugs and moves on to the next panic. But, for a brief glorious moment, mephedrone has its turn in the spotlight and leaves behind a trail of memes, muddled speeches, and the enduring memory of a room full of politicians desperately trying to pronounce the word mephedrone without starting a national giggle fit. Front pages declare the end of civilization. Stock photos of sweaty ravers, before and after shots, and interviews with concerned neighbours. It's a national crisis, unless you're actually there, in which case it's mostly people hugging traffic cones. The morning ritual begins with the thud of the newspaper on the doormat. Britain's finest tabloids scream teen, zombie horror, plant food, panic sweeps, UK. The accompanying photos are always the same. Young people with wild eyes covered in a sheen of sweat, illuminated by club strobes or caught mid-blink, giving the impression that the entire nation's youth has been replaced by extras from a low-budget horror film. Underneath, there are breathless write-ups of secret parties and rave dens, complete with detailed lists of signs your child is a legal high zombie. Number 7. Excessive enthusiasm for drum and bass. If you believed everything you read, you'd think Britain's towns and cities had transformed into scenes from a zombie apocalypse, only instead of moaning brains, the afflicted lurch around asking for chewing gum and the Wi-Fi password. Every lost glove or abandoned hoodie becomes evidence of the latest moral collapse. Journalists with zero rave experience suddenly become experts, describing club nights as feral rituals and recounting encounters with youths whose jaws moved like broken shopping trolleys. The classic before and after photos show someone smiling in their school uniform, followed by an image of them post-party, hair mussed, eyes half closed, generally looking like every normal person does after a night out in Britain, legal highs or not. Cue the interviews with concerned neighbours. These are always conducted at a respectful distance through net curtains or from behind a wheelie bin. They used to be such nice boys, says one. Now look at them, dancing in the street, hugging lampposts, listening to music with words I don't understand. Someone else claims to have seen teenagers moving in slow motion and muttering about how lovely everything is. It's a damning indictment, or at least it would be if it didn't sound a lot like a Friday night at the Student Union, circa 1983. Politicians rush to add their voices. We are facing a crisis, says one MP on the breakfast news, glancing nervously at a printout of club slang. Our streets are in peril. The government's response? More public awareness campaigns, more hotlines, more stock footage of teenagers in tracksuits, filmed walking aimlessly around shopping precincts. The whole nation is asked to be on high alert for symptoms, group hugs, poorly timed selfies, and sudden, overwhelming feelings of goodwill. The reality on the ground, though, is something else entirely. Yes, there are parties, and yes, there's a lot of sweat, chatter, and questionable dancing. But the promised hordes of legal high zombies are mostly ordinary people, trying to squeeze every ounce of fun out of a moment that everyone senses won't last. For every before and after horror story, there are hundreds of uneventful nights, people drinking water, swapping chewing gum, dancing with friends, and leaving the club just a little bit happier and a little bit poorer than when they arrived. Of course, the hysteria has its uses. If you're a parent trying to get your teenager home by midnight, nothing beats the headline, "Young man forgets his own name after plant food party." Suddenly, everyone's texting their mum just to check in. For club owners, the panic means a boom in bottled water sales and the opportunity to introduce new, zombie-proof security procedures, mostly consisting of extra hugs at the door. In the end, the tabloid storm is just another chapter in Britain's long tradition of panicking about youth culture. From jazz in the 20s, to rock and roll in the 50s, to ecstasy in the 90s, every generation gets its turn as the harbinger of doom. This time, it's legal highs and traffic cones. Next time, who knows? Maybe oat milk lattes and TikTok dances. So the headlines shout, the neighbours worry, and politicians pontificate. But if you actually venture out, past the traffic cones and the zombies, you'll see what's really going on. A nation letting off steam, telling stories, and, sometimes, making memories worth more than any headline. Now that it's almost banned, the scientists finally get funding. Lab coats everywhere. New acronyms, urgent warnings, and one poor guy tasked with counting how many times the word euphoria is used per minute on internet forums. It's a classic move. Wait until the barns burn down before sending in the fire brigade. As the Mephedrone, Craze races toward its legislative finale, the people in white coats finally get the green light to study what half the country has already been experiencing firsthand. Suddenly, universities across Britain are packed with grant applications, ethics committees, and freshly dusted off chromatography machines. We need to know what we're dealing with, declare the experts, as if the local head shop's business model has just become a matter of national security. The first step is always the literature review, which in this case means late nights spent scrolling through endless internet forums with names like Buzz Bazaar and Legal High Sono 1. PhD students with haunted eyes pore over user reports, trying to separate fact from fiction, science from semi-coherent storytelling. Took 300 grams, felt like a rainbow, reads one post, danced for 6 hours, then gave a TED talk to my kettle, reports another. It's not exactly the gold standard of medical research, but it's a start. A brave research assistant is put in charge of tallying every use of mad buzz, next level, and inevitably euphoria. Then come the acronyms. Suddenly the air is thick with letters. NPS, novel psychoactive substances. LCMS, liquid chromatography mass spectrometry. DIA, dopamine transporter. Grant proposals pile up with promises to address the urgent public health implications of 4-MMC. That's Mephedrone, but now it sounds even scarier. A university press release announces, major study launched into effects of popular legal high, and you know it's serious because everyone in the photo is wearing safety goggles. In the labs, the work is both methodical and a bit frantic. Blood samples, urine tests, and the kind of data sheets that make statisticians cry tears of joy. The researchers run chemical analyses, mapping out exactly what mephedrone does to the brain, the heart, and, on one memorable occasion, a tray of extremely unfortunate fruit flies. Volunteers, usually. Postgraduate students lured by the promise of coffee vouchers are interviewed about their experiences, although many end up using the phrase, "I don't remember much, but it was mental." With every day, the science grows clearer. Mephedrone turns out to be a powerful stimulant, flooding the brain with dopamine and serotonin, making everything feel like the opening scene of a particularly optimistic musical. But there's a price: elevated heart rates, the infamous wonk jaw, and come down so brutal they could make a therapist cry. For some, the rush leads to addiction, paranoia, or worse. Enough to fill a dozen journal articles and at least one panorama special. Soon, the warnings begin to pile up. Government advisories land in inboxes across the country. Public Health England issues alert on 4-MMC use. Local councils rush out leaflets with clip-art brains and long lists of symptoms, none of which include over-enthusiastic sock appreciation, but probably should. Scientists are invited onto morning TV to explain, in 10 words or less, what everyone should be worried about. Inevitably, someone asks if the drug can make you see colours or turn you into a legal high zombie. The scientist, clutching a mug of cold tea, does their best to answer, while wondering if their years at university have really prepared them for this. As the ban nears, the final papers are written. The official story is recorded for posterity, doses, dangers, risk factors, and, crucially, the reminder that most people will look back and remember the time as a weird, wild, but mostly survivable chapter in the history of British club culture. Future generations will read these reports and wonder how a baggie of plant food led to such a fuss. And so, just as the doors to the party start to close, science finally arrives to turn out the lights. Too late to stop the dance, but just in time to explain the hangover. On the fateful day, shelves are cleared, Websites vanish, and every head shop owner pivots to selling incense and Bob Marley posters. It's the end of an era and the start of 1,000 back in my day stories. It comes, as these things do, with a mixture of drama and anticlimax. For weeks, rumours have been swirling, new laws are coming, Parliament is fast-tracking emergency measures, and somewhere a government minister is making dire pronouncements in front of a camera crew. The final day arrives, and it's less an explosion and more a gentle whimper. The head shops open early, but by midday the Mephedrone is gone. Where there were once rows of neon-labelled baggies, now there are only dusty shelves, the faint aroma of sandalwood, and a handwritten sign, "No plant food." Try our new herbal tea blends. In the towns and cities the air is tinged with a curious melancholy. Regulars mill around outside the now-defunct head shops, clutching empty loyalty cards and exchanging wistful looks. "Remember when you could buy a legal high with your lunch money?" one says, and everyone nods in agreement, as if recalling the golden age of penny sweets and free-range childhoods. People who never once set foot in a head shop suddenly have strong opinions, loudly reminiscing about that one wild weekend or my mate Dave who nearly joined a drum circle. Nostalgia blooms, thick and unearned. Online, the ban is headline news. Newspapers carry photos of police seizing the last remaining baggies, stern-faced and triumphant, as if they've just foiled a major jewel heist instead of shutting down the UK's brief, bizarre flirtation with bath salts. Forums light up with farewell threads. "Rippy meth. Good night, sweet prince, gone but never forgotten." There's a flurry of last-minute sales and panicked posts. "Where can I get it now?" Followed by the inevitable rumours of secret stashes and shadowy suppliers with stockpiles just in case. Meanwhile, the shop owners adapt with admirable speed. The new business model is built on herbal incense, tie-dye scarves and rolling papers in more patterns than anyone will ever need. The windows fill with tapestries, Bob Marley posters, and the ever-present not-for-human-consumption labels, now attached to bags of dried lavender and novelty stress balls. Some staff seem relieved, happy to no longer dodge questions from frantic customers or field awkward calls from the council. Others mourn the end of the gravy train, already plotting their next move, CBD oil, perhaps, or crystals for wellness. For the newly plant food-less masses, life takes on a slightly different rhythm. The Friday night queue at the head shop disperses, the text alerts dry up, and the club dance floors are just a little less crowded, a little less sweaty. Friends who once bonded over baggies now swap tips on how to make the best mocktails or debate the pros and cons of kombucha. The great wave of euphoria recedes, leaving behind only stories, some wild, some exaggerated, all of them better in the telling. And with the ban comes the inevitable rewriting of history. Suddenly everyone was there at the beginning. I remember when it was still legal, people declare, adopting the tone usually reserved for tales of Britpop and the days before smartphones. The highs are higher, the nights longer, the legends grander. Mephedrone's moment in the sun becomes a kind of folk memory, passed down like tales of school disco punch and the time someone tried to sneak a goldfish into Glastonbury. But not everyone is mourning. For some, the ban brings relief, a chance to step back, take stock, and maybe get a full night's sleep for the first time in months. The clubs keep thumping, the festivals keep dancing, and the search for the next big thing begins anew. Because if there's one thing British nightlife knows how to do, it's adapt. So the shelves are empty, the website's gone, and the air in Britain is, at least for now, a little less chemical. The nation moves on, but somewhere, in the back of every sock drawer, there's still a forgotten, baggie, a loyalty card with 9 stamps, and the memory of a time when all you needed for a legendary night out was a tenner, a wink, and a packet labelled plant food. Did banning Mephedrone end the party? Not quite. Now you need a friend of a friend, a burner phone, and a willingness to ask awkward questions at house parties. The price goes up, the purity goes down, and the stories only get weirder. Almost overnight, the landscape shifts. The comforting chaos of the local head shop is replaced by coded text messages and mysterious contacts saved under names like Plumber Dave or Carpet Cleaning Guy. Gone are the days of exchanging a tenner for a smile and a loyalty card. Now every transaction feels like a poorly scripted crime thriller. You spend hours chasing rumours, waiting on street corners, or sitting in the pub eyeing every stranger, wondering if they're your guy's guy. Paranoia is now as much a part of the process as chewing gum and water bottles. The group chat becomes your new lifeline. Does anyone know anyone? Is code for, I haven't slept since Tuesday and I need something for Friday. Someone always knows someone, usually a friend's cousin's ex-boyfriend who might still be in the game. You find yourself negotiating like a diplomat, arranging clandestine meetups and awkward exchanges in the backs of cars, usually while making small talk about weather and traffic. The days of easy, open commerce have vanished, replaced by a world that's equal parts Del Boy and Cold War spy drama. And, as any seasoned veteran will tell you, the product isn't quite the same. With the legal market gone, quality control has exited the chat. What arrives in your palm might look like the real deal, white, powdery, mysterious, but the rest is guesswork. Sometimes it's genuine mephedrone, sometimes it's something else entirely. Bath salts, random cathinones, or whatever the guy's guy had lying around. The smart ones invest in reagent kits and home tests. The less cautious trust to luck and urban legend. It's fine, I know the bloke, becomes the mantra, uttered moments before someone starts seeing double, or discovers that what they've bought is suspiciously similar to actual plant fertilizer. Prices soar, of course. Where once a crisp £10 note secured your weekend's entertainment, now you're forking over triple that for something with the consistency of baking powder and the aroma of missed opportunity. The economics are simple. Less supply, more risk, more middlemen, more profit for everyone except the punter. Meanwhile, the black market adapts. New networks, new codes, new packaging. Some people miss the days of head shops almost as much as they miss the days when their jaw didn't click. House parties, once simple affairs of cheap drinks and too loud playlists, now feel like covert gatherings. Someone always knows the number, scribbled on a napkin or lurking in a lost WhatsApp thread. You sidle up, murmur your request, and wait. Transactions happen in bedrooms, kitchens, even the garden shed. Everyone pretends it's normal, but nobody can shake the sense that the fun has been replaced by a constant low-level anxiety. And yet, the stories multiply. Tales of odd deliveries, surprise substitutes, and the wild lengths people will go to for a night's escape. Remember when we met that guy at 2 a.m. in the car park behind Lidl? Did you ever hear about the special batch that made everyone text their ex? There's a weird nostalgia in all this, a kind of badge of honour for those who remember the good stuff. Conversations in the smoking area of any club are now part oral history, part cautionary tale. Kids today, they don't know how easy they had it. You find yourself telling stories about the old days, when all it took was a quick walk to the high street and nobody ever had to memorise 5 burner numbers just to get through Saturday night. Of course, the authorities catch on. Police step up. Searches, more headlines warn of dangerous knockoffs, and every so often someone gets a mention in the local paper for possession with intent. Still, the demand never really goes away. It just gets cleverer, sneakier, more underground. So the party continues, battered but not beaten, carried on by the determined, the foolish, and the hopeful. The black market blooms in the shadows, watered by nostalgia, necessity, and the eternal British need for a good story. Because as long as there are nights out and the promise of something stronger than tea, someone, somewhere, will find a way to keep the dance floor moving, even if it means memorizing a few extra phone numbers along the way. A decade later, everyone swears they only tried it once, but somehow every story ends with, and then we wound up at the zoo. No one misses the come-downs, but everyone has a favourite anecdote, usually involving someone's dad. Time has a wonderful way of sanding down the rough edges and polishing up even the most questionable nights into legend. What was once a blurry sprint through rain-soaked streets, heart-racing and jaw-juddering, has become the stuff of group chat gold and slightly embellished pub tales. Ask anyone in their 30s who was there for the Great British Legal High Craze, and they'll roll their eyes, grin and say, "I mean, we all tried it once, didn't we?" As if it was an obligatory rite of passage, like GCSEs or buying dodgy cider at the corner shop. The stories resurface at every gathering. "Do you remember that summer?" someone asks, and suddenly everyone is a historian. "We went to 3 different clubs in one night, I swear." "Yeah, and you hugged that traffic cone for an hour. Wasn't that the night we ended up in the petting zoo at dawn?" The tales never quite match the original chaos, but that's the magic of nostalgia. What was awkward and nerve-wracking in the moment becomes hilarious, even heroic, with time. It's never just the wild nights, it's the little moments, the strange conversations in bathroom queues, the impromptu picnics on roundabouts, the epic rambling walks through empty city streets. And yes, always, someone's dad turns up in the story. Dad gave us a lift home, didn't even ask why I was wearing 2 left shoes and had a bag of plant food in my pocket. My old man once tried to confiscate mine, but he couldn't keep a straight face either. Sometimes the parents were more involved than anyone realized, picking up the pieces, keeping the kettle on, or just rolling their eyes and remembering their own misspent youth. Nobody misses the come-downs, though. If the stories are bright and shiny, the memory of Monday morning is a cautionary undertone, a gentle reminder that for every wild night, there was a price paid in regret, paracetamol, and awkward texts sent to exes. Never again, everyone swore, usually around the 3rd cup of tea, and mostly meant it until the next invitation rolled in, and the cycle began anew. The true survivors are those who live to tell the tale, and now happily let the next generation make their own mistakes. But even regret softens with age. What seemed risky, foolish, or outright bizarre at the time is now met with a chuckle. "I can't believe we thought that was a good idea," someone will say, and everyone else will nod. But underneath, there's a quiet pride, proof that they were there, that they lived through a moment so uniquely absurd that it could only have happened in Britain, only at that time. There's a bittersweet undercurrent to it too. The friends who've drifted away, the nights that can never be repeated, the realization that no matter how hard you chase the buzz, nothing beats the thrill of the first time when everything felt infinite and nothing could possibly go wrong. The nostalgia is warm, but it's edged with a wistfulness for all the things that changed, the clubs that closed, the head shops that are now vegan bakeries. Still, the stories carry on. New generations hear the tales, shake their heads, and promise they'd never do something so reckless. They're half right. The names change, the substances shift, but the urge to find the wild edge of youth, to test the rules and laugh about it later, is as old as time. One day, the latest batch of wide-eyed teenagers will tell their own "remember when" stories, just with different baggies and fresher slang. And as the night grows late and the tea runs out, you look around at your friends, older and only slightly wiser, and you realize that these memories, ridiculous, embarrassing, and precious, are the real souvenirs of that strange wild era. No one wants to go back, but no one would trade it for anything either. After all, not every night ends at the zoo, but the best stories always do. Turns out the UK survived, mostly intact. Mephedrone is now a cautionary tale, a punchline, and the reason your aunt has opinions about the youth of today. Meanwhile, the true survivors are the people who sold bottled water at 400% markup outside clubs. Looking back, it's almost hard to believe it happened at all. The headlines, the panic, the sleepless weekends, now they've been folded into the collective memory as just another weird chapter in the endless saga of British youth culture. The same way older generations talk about punk rock, Manchester, or the time someone tried to outlaw dancing on Sundays, so too does the Mephedrone era slip into legend. You don't hear about it on the news anymore, except maybe when someone's aunt brings it up over Sunday lunch. In my day, we didn't need plant food to have a good time, she declares, as if her own stories didn't include sneaking sherry at the school disco. Yet beneath all the jokes and nostalgia, there's a quieter tale of resilience. Clubs didn't close, cities didn't crumble, and the nation, far from descending into chaos, simply carried on. People adapted as they always do. Some went back to old habits, pints and kebabs, and the timeless tradition of telling strangers they're a legend. Others found new ways to have fun, safer, or at least less likely to end in blue fingers and existential dread. The truly entrepreneurial among us set up hydration stations and made a killing selling water, chewing gum, and emergency sunglasses to the masses. Of course, there were lessons learned, though not always the ones taught in school assemblies. The big lesson? That young people will always find a way around the rules, always test the boundaries, always make mistakes, and that's not a failing, but a rite of passage. For every dire government warning or stern BBC exposé, there was a counterpoint of laughter, solidarity, and kindness. This sort that only grows when people share in each other's absurd adventures. Health warnings stuck around too. After all, nobody forgets the price of a wonky jaw, or the particular flavour of come-down that only Mephedrone could deliver. Dentists got a wave of new patients, and Google searches for how to unclench jaw spiked for years. Some people carried scars, a scare in a nightclub, a bad reaction, a friend who pushed it too far. Those stories are part of the tapestry as well, a sobering reminder that every scene has its dangers, and that not all memories are funny in the retelling. But hope, if anything, grew stronger. The very fact that the panic faded, that the world didn't end, became its own kind of reassurance. Britain is nothing if not adaptable. Laws changed, clubs adjusted. The next generation found their own ways to make the night memorable. DJs swapped old anthems for new beats, and the party, as ever, rolled on. If anyone benefited most, it was probably the shopkeepers who pivoted from plant food to selling LED accessories, and the festival entrepreneurs who discovered there's no upper limit to what someone will pay for cold water at 3 a.m. What remains is the nation's strange, stubborn resilience. We turn panic into punchlines, tragedy into tales, and every setback into a new reason to keep going. The cycle of hype, worry and survival is as British as tea and queuing. When the Mephedrone ban came, it wasn't the end of fun, just the beginning of a new story, one with different risks, different characters, and the same old drive to squeeze every last laugh out of the night. And so, the memory of Mephedrone lingers, not as a threat, but as a quirky, cautionary reminder that chaos comes and goes, but people persist. Maybe your aunt's right to worry about the youth of today. Or maybe, just maybe, she's forgotten that every generation has their own wild summer, their own lessons to learn, and their own stories that end with someone singing karaoke at dawn, clutching a bottle of water and grinning like they own the world. Brief Rain is now a strange, hilarious, and oddly heartwarming chapter. As you drift off to sleep, just remember, in the end, the wildest stories are always the ones nobody planned. What did Britain really learn from the years when a packet of plant food could change the trajectory of a weekend, or an entire youth? For a while, it seemed like the whole nation was swept up in an experiment. What happens when you give a generation unfettered access to a legal loophole and enough optimism to fill 1,000 club nights? The answer: you get the perfect storm of euphoria, mischief, panic, and a surplus of truly bizarre group photos. Looking back, the lessons are both simple and slippery. For one, every attempt to control the chaos, every stern warning, every hastily printed headline only seemed to add fuel to the fire. When you tell the British public, this is not for human consumption, you may as well be handing out engraved invitations. Curiosity isn't just a trait here, it's a national pastime. Tell us not to do something and, well, you've just made it irresistible. Another lesson: young people are endlessly resourceful. Shut down the head shops and they'll find the websites. Ban the websites and they'll find the guy's guy at the party. Or invent some new workaround that makes adults shake their heads and sigh. The details change. Once it was cider in the park, then it was ecstasy at the rave, then Mephedrone in a plastic baggie. Now maybe it's vapes or something yet to be dreamed up. The spirit is always the same. Life is short, rules are bendy, and the best memories are made right on the edge of what's allowed. But maybe the biggest lesson is that none of it really lasts. Mephedrone's moment was wild and bright, but it was over in a flash, gone as quickly as it came, replaced by the next thing, and then next. The panic fades, the headlines yellow, and the country moves on, sometimes a little wiser, sometimes just a little older and more nostalgic. In a decade's time, it'll all sound faintly ridiculous, the way disco or flared trousers sound to anyone born after 1999. There's comfort in that. For all the concern, the lectures and the finger-wagging, the world didn't end. The vast majority came out the other side with a few extra stories, a handful of regrets, and maybe a new appreciation for sleep and hydration. Parents who panicked learned that worrying is just part of the job. Kids who rolled their eyes grew up and found new things to worry about. The cycle continues, and it's strangely reassuring. And so, as you let your mind drift towards sleep, it's worth pausing on that final thought. The wildest stories, the ones you'll remember years later, the ones you'll tell to friends in kitchens at 2 a.m., are almost never the ones you plan. They're accidents, misadventures, the result of curiosity meeting opportunity, and a dash of national stubbornness. You can try to control them, predict them, or legislate them out of existence, but you can't quite stop the next chapter from being written tonight, as you curl up in your clean bed, grateful for modern comforts and the absence of suspicious baggies in your sock drawer. Give a silent nod to everyone who lived through the mayhem, made it out the other side, and kept laughing about it. Because the real lesson of history, of Mephedrone, of every craze and panic and party, is that people are endlessly surprising, remarkably resilient, and always ready to find joy, even in the oddest of places. Sleep well, And remember, the wildest stories are always the ones you didn't see coming, and chances are you wouldn't trade them for anything. Behind every suburban hedge in 2009, there's at least one neighbour who thinks Breaking Bad is a how-to manual. Kitchen counters are transformed into miniature laboratories, complete with plastic tubs, mislabeled jars, and a faint smell of burned toast. Safety goggles? Optional. The dog is hiding under the table. Half the street is convinced there's a new meth empire brewing, but really, it's just Darren experimenting with crystal baths and making the world's worst PowerPoint about molecular bonding. You peer through your kitchen window one evening and spot flickering light from the next-door conservatory, punctuated by the occasional whiff of something distinctly not in the Mary Berry cookbook. Darren is hunched over the counter in his world's best dad slippers, muttering to himself as he pours what looks suspiciously like vinegar into a plastic jug labelled salt, probably. There's a faint fizzing sound, a wisp of smoke, and a gentle whoops that echoes through the fence panels. Welcome to the British Science Fair Home Edition. If you ask Darren, he'll tell you it's all perfectly legal. Just a bit of research, mate, for my mate's allotment, but the kitchen whiteboard, now covered in equations that start with "maybe try less next time," suggests otherwise. He's joined by his mates, who bring over armfuls of supplies sourced from the local pound, shop and eBay. There's an electric excitement in the air, the thrill of invention, the joy of mild peril, and the vague hope that they won't have to call 999 again this month. The workspace is a collage of chaos. There's a stained tea towel doubling as a filter, a stack of empty Red Bull cans, and a suspiciously clean set of digital scales borrowed just for the weekend. Someone has made an effort at safety. There's a pair of swimming goggles on the side and a fire extinguisher lurking behind the toaster, though everyone's secretly hoping they never need either. The dog has retreated under the table, glancing up occasionally with the resigned air of someone who's seen one too many culinary disasters. Outside, the neighbours are abuzz. Mrs. Patel at number 22 has started a WhatsApp group, Strange Smells Watch, and reports flow in nightly. Saw Darren with a funnel again. Smoke coming from the shed, should I be worried? Just heard a loud pop and a cheer, but now everything's gone quiet. Half the street is convinced they're living next to a fledgling drug cartel, while the other half are waiting to see if Darren manages to invent something actually useful, like self-cleaning gutters or a hangover cure. Inside the house, though, it's pure British amateur science, part chemistry, part chaos, all bravado. There are heated debates about whether room temperature means inside or outside, and more than one experiment ends with everyone opening every window and pretending it's for the vibes. The YouTube how-to videos play in the background, alternating between thick Glaswegian accents and Californian optimism. If you're watching at home, don't try this, obviously, they all say, right before trying it themselves. Occasionally things go surprisingly well. There's genuine triumph in the air when a batch actually turns out the right colour, or when Darren manages to create something that doesn't set off the smoke alarm. They celebrate, with tea, biscuits, and a very cautious toast to British innovation, ignoring the fact that the dog still refuses to come out from under the table. But more often, it's the mistakes that are remembered. The night the kitchen table got glued to the floor, the time someone mistook citric acid for sugar in their tea, or the infamous incident with the exploding Pyrex. Every mishap becomes a story, every disaster a badge of honour, every close call a new punchline for the pub. In the end, Britain's great DIY chemists don't change the world. But they do remind us that curiosity, camaraderie, and a stubborn refusal to read the instructions are as much a part of our culture as tea and queuing. And as the smoke clears and the dog finally ventures back into the kitchen, you can't help but admire Darren's spirit. The science might be questionable, but the memories, like most of the mess, are sure to linger for years to come. You arrive at a muddy field somewhere in Somerset, surrounded by tents, loudspeakers, and people in neon tutus. Within an hour, someone's selling plant food out of a Pikachu backpack, and everyone is suddenly a philosopher. The sun sets, the lasers start, and it's hard to tell if you're at a rave or accidentally joined a cult. By sunrise, you've hugged 12 strangers, lost your shoes, and been given unsolicited life advice by a man wearing nothing but glitter and hope. There's something about festival season in the UK that bends the laws of time, space, and common sense. One minute you're standing in the car park, wondering if you should have packed more socks. The next, you're deep in a sea of bodies, music pounding through your bones, debating the meaning of life with a girl in butterfly wings and a bloke wearing a full tuxedo jacket over pyjama bottoms. Somewhere between the burger van and the compost toilets, the last of your real-world logic quietly surrenders. Every festival is its own little universe. Some people come for the music, some for the chance to wear fancy dress without judgment, and some, let's be honest, for the opportunity to sample a dizzying variety of legal highs with names like Jolly Rancher and Space Powder. As Mephedrone fever swept the nation, the fields became marketplaces, word spreading as quickly as rumours of surprise sets or secret raves in the woods. You didn't need to know anyone, you just needed to follow the guy in the banana costume who claimed his plant food would change your perspective on existence and possibly on jacket potatoes. Sunset brings a transformation. The sensible clothes are swapped for neon, sequins, and whatever items survive the muddiest part of the car park. Lasers crisscross the sky, and every tent is its own miniature galaxy. Mephedrone, with its promise of boundless energy and tactile joy, seems to dissolve the usual social boundaries. You find yourself declaring eternal friendship to a stranger with a homemade flag. Hugs, hand-holding and heartfelt confessions are suddenly not just acceptable but required. The field is full of would-be philosophers and amateur comedians, each more convinced than the last that they've unlocked the true meaning of the universe. Of course, not everything is profound. Some moments are pure chaos. Shoes lost in the mud, tents pitched sideways, a friend convinced they've discovered a shortcut to the main stage. It's actually the recycling depot. A well-meaning stranger offers you water, only to follow it with a monologue about the healing power of dubstep. You briefly join a conga line led by a man in a shopping trolley. Logic, it turns out, doesn't survive long under these conditions, but somehow nobody seems to mind. As the hours slip away, festival time starts to wobble. Is it 4 a.m., or have you simply passed through 3 different dimensions since dinner? Someone produces a glow stick, another hands out fruit pastilles, and suddenly you're sitting on a pile of hay, plotting to start a commune based entirely on positivity and questionable haircuts. The music never really stops, just shifts tempo, echoing through the darkness and carrying you through each bewildering, wonderful hour. By sunrise, the party has evolved. The once pristine field is a patchwork of footprints, discarded wristbands, and the occasional lone welly boot. You're barefoot, grinning, and inexplicably wearing someone else's sunglasses. Around you, bleary-eyed festival-goers emerge from tents, each with their own story, some triumphant, some sheepish, all slightly surreal. Glitter sticks to your face in defiance of soap and sleep. Someone hands you a cup of tea and tells you it's for balance. The man in glitter, who has somehow become your spiritual guide for the weekend, offers one last nugget of advice. Don't sweat the small stuff, or the big stuff, or honestly, anything. Eventually logic returns, along with hunger, a vague sense of responsibility, and the realization that you've somehow lost a shoe, a tent peg, and several hours of memory. But you don't mind. Festival season is about surrendering to the madness, making friends you'll never see again, and discovering that sometimes the best adventures happen when you leave reason, and maybe your shoes at the gate. And as you trudge back to the car, blinking in the morning light, you know that plant food wasn't the strangest thing you encountered all weekend. Not by a long shot. And so, as you let your eyes grow heavy and your breathing slow, let's take a gentle look back at the glorious, chaotic mess that was the UK's Mephedrone craze. For a few wild years, you witnessed the full spectrum of human creativity and questionable decision-making, from makeshift laboratories to muddy festival fields, from the plant food wink-nudge economy to the morning-after regret sandwich. You saw resilience and ridiculousness, side by side, people riding the waves of euphoria, only to be gently deposited on the rocky shores of Monday morning reality, clutching stories they'll swear are mostly true. Tonight, as you settle into your clean bed with no risk of accidental chemical adventures or unsolicited philosophical advice from a man in a neon wig, take a moment to honour the survivors of that strange era. The clubbers and the cautious, the entrepreneurs and the experimentalists, the people who navigated panic, paranoia and pure absurdity and somehow managed to make it out the other side with nothing worse than a bad haircut and a funny anecdote. It was proof that, no matter how bizarre the moment, people adapt, recover, and find ways to laugh about it later. So as you drift off, remember to be grateful for modern comforts, the reliable sleep, the calm nights, the fact that the only thing lurking under your pillow is a charger, not a mystery baggie labelled not for human consumption. Because history is full of chaos and comedy, of wild nights and long recoveries, and it's also proof that people, no matter what decade, are stubborn, hopeful, and occasionally just a little bit ridiculous. Good night. Sleep easy, and may your dreams be far more relaxing than any Saturday night in 2009.